Hello, and welcome to Radiance Revealed, the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jen Haley. I'm a board-certified dermatologist, fitness enthusiast, nutrition expert, and global explorer that over the years has uncovered that your skin is a true representation of your internal health. Each week, we will chat with leading health, wellness, and even spiritual experts who will reveal secrets to true health and vitality. My goal is to help you change small habits to give you the power to create a more balanced, aligned, and elevated version of yourself. Now let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Radiance Revealed podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jen Haley. And I know I've had a number of episodes. We've been on hiatus for almost 2 years, and I'm restarting the podcast. I need to be inspired in order to do this sort of a thing. And I've been in a mode where I've wanted to absorb information before sharing it with anyone. And we live in a world where there's such an abundance of information out there that I need to feel as though I am adding value to your lives. So the first thing that I learned when I went to Cornell University and then medical school after that was basically when you receive information, the first thing that you're supposed to do is to check your source. And we don't do that anymore. We often believe that everything we're reading and everything we're seeing is valid and it's truthful, and we're not checking the source anymore. And I want to be a good source for you, a good source of information, a good source of knowledge, and a good source to basically empower you to take care of your bodies so that you have the radiant skin you deserve and a healthy mind and a healthy life. And that's the goal of me being here. There's no ulterior motive. This is just a point in my life where I want to give back and really empower people to live their best lives. So I was thinking about this over the last few days. What topic do I want to discuss on this week's podcast? Excuse me. And there's so many things. I mean, blood sugar regulation is something I really am passionate about. And we can all take advantage of that after the holidays and all the food we've been eating, maybe even moving a little bit less. The other thing is stress and how stress affects the skin, right? Because there's so many things from immune dysfunction to epidermal barrier dysfunction to poor blood sugar regulation from stress to reduction in the epidermal barrier and hormones and immune function. So there's a lot of things that stress does, and we will cover that. But really, I think I'm not doing you a service until we talk more about the basics of skin. So I want you to understand the basics of skin and the physiology of skin. And then we can go from there, and you will have a better understanding of how all things will affect skin. So the way I look at skin, based off of my 20 years as a board-certified dermatologist now, is it is the largest visible organ in your body. And it's extremely dynamic. So basically, it's an organ that we are able to see. We don't need to use an MRI to visualize it. We can see it in front of us. And it is representing the health of all of your organs. So your skin is a reflection of your internal health. So remember that. So the health of your skin is a reflection of your internal health. So we often forget how dynamic it is. We forget how dynamic our skin is until it's injured or we need a medication because we have a disease or a condition. And it has so many functions in our body. The number one function is to protect our body from the outside world. So when someone undergoes a severe burn or something like that, basically, they cannot maintain moisture and they can get severely dehydrated. And then infection is a huge risk. Our skin is a barrier to protect us from all of the outside influences and toxins and things like that. So when our skin is functioning properly, we're able to protect the insides adequately. So let's see. The other thing about our skin, which I love, is that it allows us to feel all the sensations through touch. So our sensory sensations in the world around us. It aids in temperature control and it controls vitamin D production. And as very well many of you understand this because I have a lot of biohackers that like to listen to this podcast. It is also your largest detox organ. So your skin is one of the major ways that we detoxify through sweating. And other ways we detoxify: sweating, breath, right? We're detoxifying that way. Urination, defecation, and then for women, menstruation. Those are some really great ways that we detoxify. And we're bringing in toxins all the time that our body has amazing systems in place to help detoxify, sweat being one of them, especially when it comes to heavy metals like mercury that we unfortunately get from our fish nowadays and a lot of other things. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the basics of skin. So our skin has three main layers, three separate layers. Each layer is comprised of different cellular structures and plays a unique role in your desired youthful glow, right? So the outermost layer is the epidermis. That's what you're looking at right now when you see me, is my epidermis. And it's made up of 95% skin cells. We call these skin cells keratinocytes. And that mainly functions as protection. So the top layer of the skin, the keratinocytes are like a brick and mortar, basically. They're like these little bricks are the keratinocytes. And then we have ceramides and we have other materials in between the cells that help keep those cells together and form a very, very good protective barrier. And those keratinocytes on the top layer of the epidermis, they don't have a nuclei, so they're not alive. So when you wipe your skin, hundreds and thousands of skin cells are coming off and they're exfoliating daily. And then that sends signals down below to stimulate new skin cells to form. So let's see. So also in the epidermis, you have melanocytes, and melanocytes are responsible for our skin tone. Okay, so more melanocytes and more distribution of melanin gives you a darker skin tone, and less melanocytes, less distribution of melanin, which is produced by the melanocytes. About one melanocyte distributes melanin to about 30 keratinocytes. So the melanin is produced deep by the melanocytes, and then it moves up through the epidermis and it deposits into the keratinocytes. And that's how you form a tan, for instance, or get darker skin. Even in someone who's Fitzpatrick type 5 or 6, dark African American, you can still get darker in the sun exposed areas because of that increased distribution of melanin to the keratinocytes. In the middle layer of the skin is the dermis, and the dermis is made up of 90% collagen and elastin. And this layer also houses the blood vessels and the nerve endings, and it's responsible for your blood flow, your sensation, and keeping your skin firm. That's why collagen health is so essential as we get older, maintaining that collagen and the elastic tissue so that we can keep our skin firm. So the epidermis, while it's a lot of the dead skin cells, there's also a deeper layer where the stem cells are, which we'll get into. But the epidermis basically is the importance of the epidermis is for barrier function. It's to protect us from the outside world, whereas the dermis is responsible for keeping our skin firm and elastic and giving it its shape and buoyancy, may I say. So the innermost layer is the hypodermis, and that main function is to store fat and providing the face and the body with structure and volume. So as we get older and our hormones change, we often will have a redistribution of our fat. So especially in someone who's very athletic, like a triathlete or an ultra marathon runner, we will lose the subcutaneous fat and it will change the features of our face as well as the features of our body. By losing that subcutaneous fat, it can change the appearance of the way our skin lies on our face. And we're seeing that a lot now with what people are calling Ozempic face, which any of the GLP-1 agonists or the GIP-1 agonists can do. When you lose a significant amount of fat, you're going to lose it from your face as well as from the rest of your body, and it can give you a really saggy appearance to the skin because the skin doesn't have a chance to turn over and restore itself and renew itself in the period of time that you're losing all that weight. So going back to the epidermis, within the epidermis, there's 4 main layers. And the innermost layer, the deepest layer, has stem cells, and those stem cells are responsible for the creation of new skin cells. So as your skin matures, it goes from the bottom layer, the basal layer, and it matures and goes up to the outermost layer. And then as the skin cells turn over, we shed the outermost layer of skin. So in that epidermis, to get from the bottom layer to the top layer, it can take about 4 to 6 weeks if you're young, if you're in your 20s. So when I see someone in the office with acne, for instance, and I'm giving them an acne, skincare regimen and a holistic lifestyle plan. Basically, I will tell them you have to stick with the plan for a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks before you could see any results. Because if you guys can see me on YouTube, if you grab your skin in those deep layers, there's already acne that's formed, and it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks to surface and come out. So we're treating it to get to the next layer of clear skin. So it takes about 6 to 8 weeks when you're young for the skin to go from the basal cell layer to the top layer of the skin before it sloughs off. Now, as you get older, those stem cells are not as active. So when you're 40, 50, 60, 70 and beyond, the stem cells are not as active, and the top layer of this epidermis it sticks on longer, it stays there longer, and it's not being pushed off by new skin cells forming. So that's often why we will recommend gentle exfoliants, not mechanical, but more of a chemical or an enzyme kind of exfoliant. So when you exfoliate the top layer of the skin of those dead epidermal keratinocytes, when you exfoliate those off, then what it does is it sends signals down to the basal cell layer to say, hey, wake up, and stimulate to make new, fresh skin cells. So now you're beginning to understand the physiology of how the skin works and why we will recommend certain things. And this is what I want you guys to be empowered with. Okay, so in the dermis now, the dermis has a cell called a fibroblast, and the fibroblast is responsible for skin remodeling and creation of collagen, elastin, and hyaluronic acid. So all three of these, the collagen, elastin, and the hyaluronic acid, these molecules are vital for healthy, youthful skin. So they help add the uh, the firmness and the elasticity to the skin through the fibroblast production of these components of the skin. So elastin gives our skin bounce. Collagen is responsible for keeping your skin tight and taut. And hyaluronic acid is your skin's natural hydration, and it keeps it plump and healthy. So hyaluronic acid will draw in water and hold and retain water and hydrate the skin. And that's why we use it as dermal fillers to help add some to add some hydration and keep the skin plump appearing. So what can you do to stimulate the fibroblast? We will discuss that in detail. Vitamin C is necessary as far as that goes. I am a proponent of collagen. There are certain types. Now, aging happens in all three layers of the skin. So in the epidermis, the skin cell turnover is governed by your metabolic rate. And in young, healthy skin, so when you're younger, normal cell maturation takes about 28 days. So to go from the bottom layer of the basal cell layer of the epidermis to the top layer, which is what you can see on me today, which is what exfoliates when we rub our skin, it takes about 28 days when you're young. And then as we age, that process takes longer and longer, meaning that we make new skin cells much, much slower. So the decrease in the new skin cell creation leads to a weakening in the support structure of the lower layers of the epidermis due to the lack of new cells being made. So on the surface of the skin, what you see is the skin isn't sloughing off as quickly, and it makes the skin look really dull and dry and even bumpy texture. So when somebody's young, they're going to have a really dewy, glowing, radiant skin, right? And as we get older, the skin cells are more adherent, and they don't exfoliate as quickly because they're not being stimulated by new skin cells below. So it can make the skin look really dry and dull just because we're not making new skin cells. So the thickening of the skin can also decrease the absorption of skincare products when you're applying peptides or vitamin C or retinols to the skin or antioxidants and things like that, or even peptides and um, exosomes as well. It just, things don't get absorbed as readily because you have so many of the dead keratinocytes on the top layer of the skin, almost insulating, but really not being effective. So things cannot absorb. So one of the things that we'll often do is we'll recommend gentle exfoliation with enzymes or some acids so that those top layer of the skin can exfoliate and come off. And that actually sends signals through the body down to the basal cell layer to stimulate new cells to form. So there's a method to why we do all this. And that's the epidermis. Now, in the dermis, we begin to lose support structure as we age. So basically, in the dermis, we have our collagen, we have our elastin, and we have our hyaluronic acid. And that is all produced from your fibroblasts in your dermis. And these fibroblasts are responsible for skin remodeling and the creation of these components of the skin. And all of these components, these molecules of the collagen, the elastin, and the hyaluronic acid are responsible for keeping the skin tight, taut, and hydrated. So it's what basically gives your skin that elasticity, the plumpness, and the healthiness we want. And one of the tests you can do to see how healthy your collagen is, if you're watching me on YouTube, I could do this with the back of my hand. You can see how healthy that dermis is. You basically take the back of your hand and you do a snap test. So you pull the skin up and have it tight. See how quickly it bounces back. And if it's hanging out there for a while, you need to do something to increase the dermis and the health of your dermal layer, your collagen, elastin, and hyaluronic acid, which we will get into in this podcast. So basically, in the dermis, as we age, we lose the support structure. So the fibroblasts are not as active and they make less collagen, and the collagen becomes disorganized. There's a lot of things in our environment that can make the collagen become disorganized. So one of the things that can happen from inflammation or from ultraviolet radiation exposure is it can cause an increase in a substance called MMP, or matrix metalloproteinase, in the dermis. And the MMP is responsible for breaking down the collagen. And then there's less collagen production on top of that, and you're just not having as much collagen as you did when you were younger. So all of these factors end up causing a thinning of the dermis. And when you don't have that support structure and you smile or you make a face, when you move your face like we do every day when we talk and chew and smile, basically you form little fine lines because you're not having that scaffolding there anymore to allow things to bounce back like they once did. So I guess when your mother told you, if you make those faces, they'll stick, she's right, eventually they will. So always have a smile rather than a frown. The other thing is the line between the epidermis and the dermis becomes flatter. So when it becomes flatter, there's less surface area than if it's wavy. So we want a wavy connection between the epidermis and the dermis when we look at the skin under the microscope. And when it's flatter, there's less surface area. When there's less surface area, there's less ability to communicate between the two layers. So in the dermis, we have our blood vessels feeding the skin oxygen and nutrients. So all the wonderful foods you take in, all the oxygen you breathe, that you want to get to your skin to deliver oxygen, to deliver nutrients, it's not getting to the stem cells of the epidermis, as well as the dermoepidermal junction becomes flatter. So the other thing is as I mentioned earlier with the Ozempic face, is we also age in the hypodermis, or the subcutis, the subcutaneous tissue. We lose fat. It goes south to other areas we don't want. It leaves our face and it goes to our waistline, typically. Often, from cortisol, from stress, from hormonal changes during our lifetime. And this can cause hollowing of the face and flattening of the cheeks. And lastly, the other thing I want to address is the loss of bone density as we age. So this is why I'm such a huge proponent of resistance training and lifting heavy weights. I've done it my entire life. I have lifted weights for over 35 years, even during pregnancy. I have never become huge and bulky. And trust me, I try. I try to, develop muscles because I understand creating muscles sends signals to bones, and then that increases your bone health. So all of these things from the inside out really come into play into the face that we show up in the world. And the other thing about that type of exercise, weightlifting or high intensity interval training, anything that can increase the health of the blood vessels is also going to help stimulate and enhance blood flow so that you can deliver oxygen and nutrients to the skin. And then also you have the blood flow returning to remove all the waste products, because every day that we're breathing, that we're alive, that we have a metabolism, we're producing waste products all of the time. And this is why we can talk about fasting the right way and doing other things in our lives so that we can help clean up the waste, right? And allow our bodies to work optimally, because they do so when we're young. And as we get older, things kind of pile up and they don't work as efficiently. So the cool thing about all of this is that there's this thing in science that we now understand called epigenetics. And when I went to medical school, I was taught, your genetics. Oh, it's your genetics. Oh, it's your genetics. And yeah, genetics plays a role. If your parents age slowly, you definitely have an edge, and vice versa. But we find that genetics, it accounts for 10, maybe 20% of how you age and your health. And that is so empowering, right? I mean, the reason I do all of this is because I want you to be empowered to take steps in your life and to realize every decision you make can lead you in one direction or the other direction. Not that we want you to live in an absolute world, because the compound effect matters so much, right? So one decision of like eating the ice cream sundae out of 365 days a year, that doesn't matter. One decision to lie on the couch and watch Netflix out of 365 days of the year, that doesn't matter. But if you do it every day, now you're compound affecting. On the other hand, if you just take a walk after dinner for 15 minutes, at the end of the year, you walked 60, 70 hours more than you would have walked if you didn't do that walk after dinner. So there's these small little habits that we make decisions every day that hopefully then become a natural habit that push us in the right direction or the wrong direction. And that's my goal, is to empower you to move in the direction that you want to move in, right? So we don't have to age like our parents. Okay. We will in some respect, but we don't have to age at the same rate. That's why when you see someone on TV, like somebody was saying All in the Family, I don't know if you've heard that show before, but All in the Family was a TV show that was really popular when I was growing up. And the woman on that TV show was 50, I think. I thought she was about 75, and nowadays you see someone who's 50 and they look like they're 30. So this is the world we're living in, and everything is possible. It's just what you believe it is. So it's like when Roger Bannister ran, the first mile under 5 minutes, or some of you know this better than I do. And then everybody started doing it. It's just a belief. So we can all do that. Okay. So basically that is how I wanted you to understand about the epidermis and the dermis. So basically, just to recap a little bit, the thickness of the dermis also, you need to know, it varies depending on the different areas of the body. So different areas of the body are going to have different thicknesses of the dermis. And then the dermis has the collagen and the elastic tissue, but it also has your nerves and your sweat gland and your blood vessels. And the epidermis affects the texture and the tone of your skin. So the epidermis is the texture, the tone, the brown spots, the red spots, the glowing of your skin, whereas the dermis is the plumpness and the bounce back of your skin. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the extrinsic factors that affect how you age. So one of them, a main one that we see as dermatologists, is UV radiation and sun exposure. So I don't consider the sun the devil. I live in Arizona. I am a sun seeker. I love the sun. The sun is essential for energy. It's our vital life force. It's amazing. What I don't like about UV radiation is the fact that over long periods of time, it causes genetic mutations, it causes weathering and damage and aging of the skin to a dramatic degree. You see someone who's a rancher who takes their shirt off and their chest looks like a baby's bottom, and their arms and their face look like a rotisserie chicken. So, this is what UV radiation does to the skin over long periods of time. So, this is why I recommend SPF 30 or higher to your face, neck, chest, and the back of your hands every single day. It's not debatable. And I'm not against getting sun exposure to other areas. So, if you live in Arizona and you're fair, Fitzpatrick type 1 through 3, like me, Hispanic or lighter, then getting some sun to your legs and your torso 10 to 15 minutes 3 times a week is going to help you produce vitamin D. And it's also going to help recharge your energy force. You know, that we just know what the sun does. It does a lot of things. And if you have dark skin, if you're African American and you live in Chicago, that is not going to be sufficient for you. Either way, you're going to need vitamin D. So no one has been reported to overdose on vitamin D. And I like to take vitamin D with D3 with K2, 5,000 IU's per day. This is what I personally take. It's fat soluble. So if you skip a day, you're not going to lose it in your urine like a B vitamin. And you really need to have your blood levels checked by your primary care doctor and monitored and adjusted accordingly. Because some people do not make vitamin D well through the sun. Some people do not absorb vitamin D well through diet. So you don't know what kind of genetic SNP you have, if you have one, and how well you're going to assimilate it. But I really like to see a blood level in my patients of vitamin D between 50 and 80. That's the sweet spot for me. So ultraviolet radiation it's a low hanging fruit. So if you want to have nice skin on your face, you're going to wear sunscreen every single day. If you struggle with brown spots, I'm half Spanish, so I struggle with brown spots on my skin. I like to wear a tinted sunscreen because a tinted sunscreen is basically, if you could see me on YouTube, that's my only makeup that I have on. And it just covers everything up. It also has iron oxide in it. So the tint has iron oxide, which helps prevent brown spots from visible light in computer screens and things like that. So low hanging fruit, take a good quality sunscreen and put it next to your toothbrush and apply it every morning before leaving the house, every morning. Even if you don't think you're going to be outside, you're getting at least 10 minutes of sun every single day just walking to and from your car. So 10 minutes a day now we know is over 50 hours a year. 50 hours in the sun is a lot. So UV radiation is the first thing. The second thing that is one of the extrinsic factors of aging is basically pollution. So obviously people who live in city are going to have more environmental toxin exposure than somebody who, lives in the countryside with really good air quality. Any kind of chemicals you come into contact with. And the biggest thing in our society, I would say, is plastic, pesticides, and then food. So when you're eating food that is in a package and you're reading all the ingredients, all of those preservatives basically are getting consumed by your body. Your body doesn't identify them as food. It has to detoxify and clean them out. And it has to do that through the skin, the urine, defecation, all of the things that we do to detoxify, and it's preventing your body from basically renewing itself and regenerating itself. So the less exposure to chemicals that you have, the better you're going to be as far as extrinsic aging. Stress is a big one. And I'm a big fan of the 4-7-8 breath. We're going to talk about that in the future. Alcohol is not good for your skin. I could tell when someone drinks a lot. And sleep, exercise, we talked about blood flow and how important that is. And then another big one is going to be blood sugar regulation. So I will do a deeper dive into blood sugar regulation because it's something I'm very passionate about. But basically, when you have high sugar levels in your blood, it binds with proteins all throughout your body, but the proteins in the collagen and the elastic tissue, and it makes them stiff. So instead of having that pliability, that ability to bounce back, they become very stiff and not effective. And they form advanced glycation end products. The sugar, when it binds with protein, forms advanced glycation end products. And then the advanced glycation end products bind with receptors called RAGEs, receptors for advanced glycation end products. And those RAGEs form a lot of inflammation in the body. So that's why, you can get red and blotchy and all sorts of rashes and things like that. So I could always tell I could tell in myself, and I could tell when somebody doesn't have good blood sugar regulation as well as alcohol on their skin. And the good thing is we can kind of turn it around within a few days as well. So we have the power to go in either direction. And if you start playing with this, you'll notice the changes in your skin. It's kind of interesting. So those are some of the extrinsic factors and things that we can control. Now, the intrinsic factors, things that we can't control, for me, I don't have great bones. I have small bones. I don't have great teeth. I have some inherent obstacles to overcome. And that's why I'm such a big proponent of doing all the things to make that in my favor, and you all have your own obstacles to overcome, but we're not going to focus on the genetics. We're going to focus on what we can do to gain control over our lives so we could make the decisions that basically give us the edge to live our best lives and have our healthiest, most radiant skin. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on this year. Okay. Happy New Year, everyone.
If you're enjoying the Radiance Revealed podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, please give us a review, as that helps others to find this podcast. And if you want to connect with me, please visit my website, drjenhaley.com, or you can find me on Instagram at drjenhaley.
Hello, everyone. Just a friendly reminder that this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The statements and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility made for statements made by guests. Neither this podcast nor any of the information contained within it are a substitute for care by a qualified medical professional. This podcast is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or professional advice or services. If you are looking for help in your journey, please seek out a qualified medical practitioner.